So, a couple of weeks ago, I was rolling, and if you guys don't know what rolling means, it's not a drug, okay? It is jujitsu. Jujitsu. So, I started doing some jujitsu again. But before I get into that, I was rolling, which means you're kind of doing, which is like you're like trying, it's like sparring. Sparring, if you don't know what sparring is, which you should by now, sparring is just like you're hitting each other. But in jujitsu, it's you're wrestling with each other, like wrestling. Anyway, you should know what it is. I was rolling with this guy, cool purple belt, at this gym I go to. Long story short, we're doing a drop of Nagi as part of the drill, and I'm wearing a white belt. White belts are notoriously known for ruining things. They ruin people's knees, their legs, their ligaments, and it's not their fault. But, they get eager and they want, be the next UFC fighter, or they watch UFC and they're like, I can do that. I mean, kudos. It's cute that you think you can. But that being said, I was rolling with this guy, and he's like, "Oh, we'll go." Okay, just being nice. And he says, like, I grab his lapel. So if you guys don't know what a lapel is, it's the gi. Now it's the collar of the. So when someone says grab the lapel, that's what that means, or the sleeve, which obviously we know is a sleeve. So I grabbed his lapel, and he was like, "Wait a minute, you know your stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of messed around a little bit." So then later, we were doing the drill and whatnot, and then he was, him and I were talking, and he's like, "Oh, so you're a Ronin? You traveled and trained all over the place?" And I took a moment, not there, but I took some time to think about that, and I was like, "Yeah, actually, now that I mention it, I am a Ronin." I got a text, and that being said, yeah, I that wasn't the first time that I've been kind of told that. It made me think about even what I'm doing here. So before we even get into it, the entire purpose of me even trying to do this, I might even do like a limited series, is because like I've come to realize that I've been lost in the sauce. I get everyone else, including, it just doesn't matter what it doesn't matter like what niche you're in. We all kind of get lost in some kind of sauce, whether it's work, our careers, our hobbies, within the church, without the church, in the world. We just can't kind of get overlooked. And then we look at other people's highlight reels and we're like, we're missing out on life. And that could be nothing further from the truth. Right. And I started thinking about like me and my life. And when you brought that up, it was like a split moment when I was like, wow, yeah, now that I think about it. Because I never really sat under anybody when it came to jujitsu. Jujitsu is just, this isn't about jujitsu. This is more about like the journey that brought me here. So back in, man, I was born in 1990, and my dad was doing taekwondo in Bell at this gym called Sangi Academy. Now back then, this is like the 80s. So you're thinking like, end of the 80s, but he trained during the 80s, and he was like, think of Van Damme, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris. Like this is like that era, right? And sport karate was the thing. And everyone was challenging each other. They had those like small little sparring gloves. Anyway, my dad had me in that, started at 4 years old, martial arts, and was training at his gym. I got my black belt at the gym that he got his black belt at. So that was kind of cool, little lineage. We were under a teacher called Master Domino. And from what I remember distinctly the smell of the spot because it was right next to like a pastry spot. They made like bandusa and all different types of stuff. And if you're not from LA, which I'm pretty sure most of you guys listening to this will probably be from LA, but if you're not from LA, it's like a Spanish sweetbread. Anyways, I I trained there for a little bit. Obviously, as a kid, I had no choice. But this is one thing that kind of like stuck with me. There's a few things that stuck with me there, but one of them was that my dad always told me that because I wanted to quit. There's so many times I wanted to quit, and I'm so grateful that my mom nor my dad allowed me to do so. I wanted to quit many times, and there was really no reason. I think most of the time is because I was lazy, right? And I remember my dad telling me, "You're gonna regret it one day if you quit. If we allow you to not do what we put you in for, you will look back on this day and always say, why didn't I start?" Or you'll hear people's story about how they were able to get to their black belt and you didn't, and you could have, but you didn't. Now looking back, he was right. So very grateful. I don't regret. There's a few things I do regret when it comes to the martial arts world, but we'll get into that. So after that, my dad started his business like around, I was like maybe like 10, 12, 13 years old. He started his business in Southgate, and Southgate is like You guys don't know LA. Most people might be from Jersey or whatnot listening to this. So LA is not like Jersey. Jersey, you got Mount Laurel, then you got to drive maybe about 10 minutes, and you're in Cherry Hill. Then you drive about another 10 minutes, and then you're like in maybe Collingswood or whatever. But like LA is like New York on a piece of bread. I can drive to Southgate from Orange County and hit like 10, 15 different cities within that driving range. So it's in LA County, and it's right next to Linwood. Linwood's connected to Compton. Compton, Watts, Long Beach. It all kind of mingles, so people kind of connect. But my dad started his business in the recreational center in Southgate. Take a quick sip. That being said, he had a dude named Juan and his brother Ale who came from the gym he trained at, and they were helping my dad at his gym. His location, he started it off with just me, my brother, my sister, or sorry, not my sister, she wasn't born yet, but it was me, my brother, and some of our relatives. So, like my cousins, Michael, Jessica, Jimmy Lett, like just a bunch of cousins. And then they stopped coming, and then it went from that to we were going to a church in the city we were living in, and we started inviting people from our church to come, and it was growing. It was now I'm thinking back and I'm running my business and I'm like, dang, I have some big shoes to fill. Like my dad was killing it at my age, right? Granted, I moved a lot, but yeah, so there's that. And throughout this journey, my dad's running his business and stuff. We had family issues, and I'm not going to get too deep into that, but because that's not my story to tell. But I definitely took it personally. During this time, I think I was like maybe relatively like I would say like fourth, fifth grade. And I remember this one moment. I got pulled into the office, and this is really interesting. My dad will remember it, but I got in trouble for fighting, and then I was bullied a lot because I was tiny. And I got pulled into the office for fighting. And then during that time, my dad had brought my little brother, who was I think like 4 or 3 years old at that time, because I was like 10. And I remember my brother was on the schoolyard, and we were there just playing with a bunch of kids and stuff. And then one kid pushed my little brother, and it was like, I think his name was Ellis. I don't remember, but he pushed my brother, and it was like, go. I remember vividly. I did a lead roundhouse kick, boom, kicked the kid, and my shoe fell off. I had like Osiris's on, and my shoe fell off, and then I went for a punch, bink, and then the schoolyard teachers pulled us off. And then I get pulled into the office, and my dad's like, I just got pulled in because you were already fighting. Now you're fighting again. And we go home, and I remember this, man. My dad was like, so what happened? And I was terrified, dude. I was scared. I was like, my daddy's gonna spank me. Like, oh, there's just something different when your dad gets angry at you than when your mom does. When your mom does, you're like, nah. When your dad does, it's like, okay, hell's gonna, freaking the heavens are gonna come down on me, right? My dad asked me like, what happened, and I told him. I said, this kid pushed Brendan, and I freaking kicked him, and I fought him. And my dad said, good. So it's so cool because like he told me at that time, he's just like, don't ever let anybody lay their hands on your family. I don't care where you're at. I don't care who gets in trouble. You don't ever let anybody else hit your family, and that stuck with me. So moving on, I moved on from that to like taking that as a badge of honor, and then like I think a year after that, my family fell apart. My mom had their issues. I took it as the oldest that I had to step in and be the dad, and that's not true at all. That was never my option. My dad never did that. He also didn't leave. Like he didn't like, all right, see you guys later, deuces, figure it out. My dad like was involved in our lives, and I still to this day like think back on that moment, and I was like, dude, I was so dumb because I made it seem as if like in this moment, and I'm sharing this with you guys so that way you guys have an understanding of how this molded me as a person, and then it bled into my martial arts. But I always saw myself as like this guy who was like, so I'll just go back to that story, right? So my dad fell apart. My dad fell apart, and I just kind of took that personally because my dad was now he's not living with us, and he chose that. That's how I saw it. He chose that, and he chose not to be with the family. And it doesn't matter if it was between my mom and my dad. My dad still loved us, but I saw it as like, no, you don't. Your love in your vocabulary, by you sharing that and it coming out of your mouth, doesn't mean anything because your actions don't back it up. And what were his actions? In my mind, he wasn't living with us, but I didn't really understand the nuance of like divorce or separation. And I wanted him to be around. I wanted him to stick around, and he didn't, and he couldn't. My mom and my dad had their beef, and I took it upon myself and I had this like burden to carry. And we found out that my dad was having a sibling. He was having a kid with another lady, and again, I got upset about that. We ended up like making amends with that over time. But my dad started. This is right around a little over after my dad started his business. So now my dad's starting his business. He brings these guys on from the gym that he was training at, Juan and Ale, and they brought their friend Victor. Victor was like my arch nemesis. Like this dude was he. I was jealous of him only because my dad would always compare me to him. Right? He would be like, "Oh, Victor, look at Victor. Victor's putting in work. He's at the gym, he's training, he's doing this." Now, Victor has a different story, but for me, I was like, dude, screw this guy. Like, my dad's comparing me to this dude, and I'm better than him. But it wasn't that my dad was saying, like, you suck, Victor's better than you. It was the fact that my dad was saying, Victor is applying himself, you're not. And that comparison, there are some, like, there's some downsides to that, but that comparison kind of led me to, kind of fine, well, screw you then, I'll do my own thing. And I kind of got rebellious. I was always kind of rebellious. It was like a loose cannon. Um, it went from that to, I started, just kind of like isolating myself from my dad and my mom and my brother and my sister. My sister was at the time was like an infant; she was little, and my dad, having promotions, and Victor was like student of the month. And every time my dad would come, and like we were helping him at his gym, but sometimes I just wouldn't even show up. My brother was going, he was going, he was on his way to get his black belt, and I was just like, no, that's not for me. I'm done with martial arts. And yeah, and little by little, I went into junior high. So we moved. We were in East LA. East, I think it was like no, not East LA. Was it? No way. Anyway, we lived by like Van Nuys, so not it wasn't necessarily Eagle Rock. That's what it was. Eagle Rock. We lived in Eagle Rock. Moved from Eagle Rock to Compton. We were living in Compton for a little bit, and then once my dad started his business, he moved out to Downey, and we were living in Downey. And my brother was going to school and daycare and everything in Downey. So he had that connection in Downey. I didn't. So I didn't really have, like a community. I was always just kind of like bouncing around. And funny thing is that's still kind of where I'm at today. And I'm trying to like not do that. But anyway, all this to be said, he's running the gym, he's doing a good job, and I'm in and out every once in a while, kind of get the motivation to teach again, and try to show my dad I'm better than Victor, and go and spar and whatever. And then I got into like high school, and I went through a very awkward phase, man. I used to straighten my hair. So my mom used to go to this lady named Sunny. I was like in the neighborhood. And the funniest thing is like she used to go and get perms, right? I would want to go and straighten my hair because I was like going through this emo phase and emo like skater phase, and I wasn't a skater. I was a rollerblader. So I was like, I want to have straight hair. I want to be able to like, wow, flip it. It's just so goofy. And I was like different from like just man, I sound so dumb. I was different. I wanted to be a surfer. There's just so many things I wanted to be when I was in California. And I wasn't any of those actually. But anyway, that to be said, yeah, I was going through that phase in high school. I was a very rebellious stage, and I ended up like wanting to be. I remember I was like obsessed with superheroes. So before the superhero phase, though, was Jackie Chan. So I was watching Jackie Chan during elementary school. My dad got me into like Bruce Lee movies, and then we would go and watch like at the matinee, some small Chinese like area. We'd watch like two movies for like $5 on a Friday or something. And we'd watch Jackie Chan, and then it would first be like an old Bruce Lee 70s film, and then we'd go take a little break and then come back and we'd watch like Rumble in the Bronx. And that dude was like Jackie Chan's cool. So I watched all Jackie Chan's movies, right? And I was so motivated by Jackie Chan. I wanted to be like him. So I would say around like 14, 15 years old, I got in touch. I don't know how I got in touch. There's like this like stunt company because I think I was on. This is like right around the internet phase, and there's this company called ZG Stunts, and they were doing like they were connected with. They weren't. It wasn't like Jackie Chan, but they were connected within that industry. And I was like, hey, I sent him a jacked up message, and I'm like, hey, I'm 16 years old. I want to do martial arts, and I do martial arts, and I'm a third degree black belt in Taekwondo. Exaggerated the truth a little bit. I was like, I want to be like Jackie Chan. I want to do this. I want to do that. And they're like, all right, well, come out, bring your mom, bring your parents with you, and we'll come. And I went and I met the guy, and the guy says like, yeah, we worked with Jet Li, we worked with Jackie Chan. I thought it was awesome. Like I was just like, dude, this is it. I made it. And it was just like, well, because you're a minor, my mom took me. So he was like, since you're a minor, we're gonna need your parents to bring you to all the events or whatever. And obviously that didn't happen because my parents were doing their own things. I'm like, dude, you guys ruined my life. They didn't, but that's how I took it. After that phase, I was like maybe junior. No, no, I was like a sophomore, junior, and I got really obsessed with Jackie Chan stunt team stuff. Right, so I tell people, man, if I couldn't be a stuntman, I wanted to be a superhero. If I couldn't be a superhero, I wanted to be a stuntman. It was like one of the two, right? And I was obsessed with superheroes. I was obsessed with Batman because I found out that my dad and we got in a car accident when I was younger, and he sued the guy who hit him because it was like a really bad accident, smashed his truck, and we got some money for it. So me thinking I probably had like $50 billion squared away, which that wasn't the case at all. Um, I was like, I'm gonna be Batman. I'm just gonna save my money. I'm gonna train. I'm gonna learn how to be a ninja. Went right back into martial arts. So I was like, I was always ebbing and flowing. I tried judo. I tried ninjutsu. I tried capoeira. Like I just wanted to be epic, right? And what ended up happening, man, was that my dad, like, he would always encourage me to do things, but he always told me, come back to the gym, come back to the gym. So every once in a while I'd go, and then around this time, Victor was like, I don't know where he was. He was training. He got his black belt at my dad's gym, and then he was training somewhere, Legends MMA. And then around my senior year in high school, he ended up going to Legends MMA. My dad invited me to go see one of his fights, and it wasn't until after that I was like, dude, when I saw him fight, I was like, that's what I want to do. But see, here's the difference. I didn't want to fight the way he did. I'd like the recognition, the attention that he got during the fight. That's what really got my attention. It wasn't, the hard work that you put behind it. It wasn't the technique. It wasn't the grind, the hard, like getting hit and getting leg kicked is not fun. I didn't like that. I like what it looks like, right? And that was always my problem. But moving on, like, Victor ended up like training with Eddie Bravo and all these people, and then I just, eager. Hey, how do I train? How do I train? How do I do what you're doing? And you just said you gotta go to this gym. You gotta literally, like, he just kind of was like, I don't know what to tell you, like, go train, like, go figure it out. And he did give me some pointers, but then he started teaching us at my dad's gym on Fridays. And that became a thing. Every Friday night, we'd have like sparring night. So it'd be the same workouts he's doing at fight gyms, he would bring here. And I thought that was really cool. And then my dad brought in Jens Pulver to do some like thing. And because I think he was like Jens Pulver had a crazy story too. And it was wild. Like we all got to see and meet like real athletes. After that, I started like training, and the way I started training was I went to a gym I went to like a Muay Thai gym, and Valdez Muay Thai, and I was training with Valdez, and I had my first fight, lost my first fight, and immediately he was like, I want to take you to Mexico. I don't know about that. Let me talk to my daddy. So I talked to my pops, and my dad was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And when I actually thought about it, my dad was actually looking out for my best interest. And I kind of chickened out, didn't own up to it. I just disappeared. And then I went to another gym called Black Man MMA. I found out through a friend. I forgot who. But essentially, it was a gym that this coach was friends with Boz Rutan, and they started this like fundraising program to, like, I guess, help kids, troubled youth and stuff. And they had wrestlers and fighters, running it, and it was kind of cool actually. But I realized like that's kind of what I liked, the training part, but I didn't like the sucky part of getting beat up. No one likes to get beat up, really. But that was that phase. And after that, I ended up asking Victor. I was like, "Look, dude, these guys are cool, but like I want like real training." So he said, "All right, I'm gonna take you to CSW. I'm training this new place. It's in Fullerton, but if I'm gonna take you, you better be up." Now, mind you, practice was not 5 a.m. It was like 10:30, right? The dude. Now I'm thinking about it, man. He didn't have to do any of this stuff, and I'm super grateful he did. I really am. But he would get up. He would get up. I don't know what time he would get up, but he would come to my house. I'd be out doing whatever this was after graduation, right? So he would come pick me up, and then I would, like, I don't know what I was doing, but I would be out late at night with some girls or whatever. I'd just do my own thing. And I would be out just like the typical dude who's like just talented but wasting his talent. I'd be out there doing stupid stuff, go to sleep at like 2 a.m., and then I'd be sleeping into like whenever. And he would be banging on my door. Let's go to practice. Let's go, right? And I got to the point where I just leave the door open. So I'm like, all right, well, if I'm asleep, just come in. I'll just come in and wake me up. Wake me up. I'd shower, brush my teeth, jump in the car. We'd go to practice. Sometimes, my first time going to practice, I remember I saw these big dudes because I've never seen big dudes before. And if you're not from California, I mean, if you're not from California, you wouldn't understand what I'm saying. But like, if you're in California, when you're in like Downey, Southgate, Compton, like these are like areas where it's just kind of like, I don't want to say average Joes, but these dudes are like pretty basic. They're not really big. They're not really tall. Like, but like when these are like heavyweights. Like there was like Josh Barnett. You know, I trained. I met Mike Bisping. I met. This is why my first time I met Satoshi Ishii, and I met. There's no, oh Eric Prindle. These dudes were huge, man, and they're not just big dudes. Like these are big dudes who can kill you with their hands, right? And not make a big deal of it, right? So there's a few other fighters, big names, but there's one guy named Christopher something, I forgot. But Francisco Rivera also came there and trained a few times. But there was, yeah, Eric Paulson had a lot of like a big like revolving door of a bunch of heavyweights, and I'd be there with Victor, and my first time there, I remember I was getting taken down. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what a wrestling. I didn't know what wrestling really was. I just like because like I said, like in high school, I didn't really apply myself. So yeah, man, I think I just was just getting rocked all the time. I was getting one kid I freaking hated. His name was Steve, and he now I'm thinking back and I know about etiquette. He literally sought me out because I was an easy target. So the dude would like we'd go run 2 miles, come back. After we'd run 2 miles, we'd be wrestling or doing jujitsu or whatever, and then they'd be like, "All right, get your MMA gloves on," and then we get our MMA gloves on, and then my coach would be like, "All right, grab a partner, let's go. We got rounds." And Steve was like, "All right, Omar." And at the time I was like, "Oh, he thinks I'm cool, right?" Like, no, dude, this guy, like, I was an easy body to beat up. Training there for a little bit, and then something happened. I think I just got like tired of getting beat up, and I just stopped like going to practice. And I told Victor, he would ask me, "You coming to practice tomorrow?" I said, "Nah." And then a few times I ended up going to like other gyms closer to me, and I just was like kind of wandering really. And I decided, all right, well, I'm going to try to get a trade. You know, I want to do something with my life. Fighting's not going to help me at all. Sorry. So I ended up getting a job. I had a few jobs like bouncing around, and then I had this job UEI College, which was like down the street from the gym that I was training at before. And Victor was like, "Yo, after whenever he kept like insisting, go to practice," and I didn't ever really wanted to. But then I started hating this like school. It's like trade school thing. It was a garbage. It was kind of a scam. It was a scam. And I just said, "All right, I'm done with this crap." Like I just hated the bureaucracy behind school, and just even though it was a farce, like I couldn't stand it, man. And I ended up leaving and went back to practice. After practice, one day, I told Victor, I was like, "All right, I'm gonna start coming." Started going, and then they announced that they were gonna have fight practice. They were gonna have a fight team tryout for the amateurs. So Victor encouraged me to try out. I tried out. I made the team, and then I remember one day after practice, we were driving home, and it actually hit me what he had said. He said, "Look, I'm going to tell you something because you're in a position that you don't even realize. Like nobody, what you're doing right now, you training with us and everything, people watch these guys fight on TV and pay money to watch them fight. Meanwhile, they're working regular desk jobs. They're not doing this. They're not average person is not being hit in the face. He's not being taken down. He's not being pressured the way we're being pressured. Take a moment to think about that." And I thought about it, and over time, like it actually always like kind of resonated with me. And he was right, you know, like you can't expect yourself to be whatever fighter and at the same time, you know, work at a desk. Like I'm telling you right now, when you realize that you can hurt someone and then choose not to, on a daily basis and have to work with someone who's telling you what to do, giving you attitude, it's like, do you realize I can put your face in the ground and make you eat your own hand? Like, it's beside me. But I learned that, right? So then around that time, I had my first fight. I think yeah, my first fight, Victor was cornering me, and I think it was Victor and my dad. And then after that happened, man, freaking, I did like a jump spinning crest kick, bink, knocked the guy out, knocked his mouthpiece out, and then I finished him with the Superman punch. And I felt like I was on top of the world. But here's the thing, when you're on that high, like it comes down quick. And some things happened in life, and then kept training, and I just figured out I won one fight, I got to get the next one. So the next one I got during this time, CSW was going through a weird transition, and going to, I ended up getting a fight, and Victor and Josh were going to Japan to fight. And I think my friend Shohei, yeah, I think Shohei was going as well, and Josh was dating some girl at the time. They all went to go fight in Japan. Meanwhile, I was back, and this is where I met my friend Justin Pierpoint. Pierpoint was from the East Coast, came out here, and he was with Jessamine, Shayna, Marina, and like the three girls that were Rhonda's like close friends, and they all were training at CW. And Justin and my dad were in my corner in my second fight, and the guy took me down and just held me on the ground. and didn't really get to do much, me or him. And the third round, I caught him with a front kick, and the rest of the round I was chasing him, and then I lost the fight by decision. After that, I realized I didn't work on my ground game, but I was too arrogant to admit it. Um, I had a second fight. I had a third fight. So, in the third fight, same thing. The guy was fighting. The guy rushed me, boom, clipped me, kind of dazed me a little bit. They stopped the fight. I lost by TKO. Then the next one I won by TKO, and then the third one I won by I lost. It was in Hawaii, and it was a same thing. Guy bum rushed me, boom, 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 and didn't drop me, but he like clipped me, and they stopped the fight. So that being said, I didn't really have much of a admiring career, and then life happened, right? So I came back, and I was during all this time I wasn't really focusing on work. I wasn't responsible. I had a car. I had a Ford Taurus. Didn't take care of that. Over time, I ran it into the ground, and then I had asked my dad for help to get me a Dodge Dart. He was a co-signer. I was working at the airport at the time. I was working at LAX, right? And the cool thing about that was that I was working at LAX, and then fight practice would be done, and then I'd go to work because I'd work in the night. And I remember I was sharing everyone at my job. Oh yeah, I did this, I did that. I trained with so and so. Kind of braggadocious, right? And at the time, because LA, everything's close together. If I wasn't working there, I was working at a cigar shop because I was trying to pick up the name Wolverine, right? That was going to be my fight name. Yeah, man. What ended up happening after that was I found out my mom was going to sell our house, and I lived in this house with my mom, my brother, and my sister. And my brother always was like kind of my brother was he's always he's the coolest one. My brother, out of all of us, my brother's the coolest one. You guys know him out there in California. The dude is like a cool cat, and he's dedicated. I think my brother has been very underestimated, but he's dedicated to the cause. And he was the one that told me, like, hey, like, Josh, I talked to Josh a few times, and I think you need to work on your ground game because, your stand up's great, but I mean, people are going to take you down. And he was right. And during this time, my mom was telling us she was going to sell the house. And I wasn't really like a responsible child. I was a man child. I was 24 years old, and I wasn't doing anything to help my mom. Like, the house, like, I just wasn't. It was our home, and I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't helping. I wasn't doing everything that like a responsible son should do. And I was kind of living like a teenager, and like a man child. Oh, what ended up happening after that was, I told my brother. I remember this moment. We went down to Seal Beach, and we were right by the jetty, and we were both smoking cigars. And I said, all right, well, what do you think we should do? And he said, well, I'm going to be on the ELAC wrestling team, and you should apply for ELAC college. And, once we sell the house, we'll live with dad and we'll just go wrestle. And I really didn't like that. I didn't want to live with my dad. I had this like very bougie like lifestyle that I wanted to like manifest, and it didn't work out. Right. So I was just like, I don't know if I want to do that. But I wasn't forced. I was forced to make a decision. It was either I was going to do that or I was going to have to survive and figure it out. At the time, my friend Pierpoint was helping me out and telling me, hey, look, I can get you a job working with me on this cabin we're going to be building in Washington State, Lumi Island, I think it was. So come out, we'll pay you, and your situation, it'll help your situation out. Oh, that's exactly what I did. I took my brother for it, and my brother told me, he said, hey, let's go ELAC. We'll apply for ELAC. So I did. I wrestled the semester, didn't really do too well. And this is the interesting thing, too. There was a guy there that was a reporter, and he wrote on me and my brother. And I'm like, I lost every single match. There wasn't one match that, like, not even, like, the one thing I think I took away from wrestling was the drilling. I hated going to wrestling practice. I hated school. I still hate school. And somehow this guy just wrote, there were so many other like way better athletes than me. And my brother, like, dude, write about my brother, but he wrote about me and my brother. So that was cool, I guess. But I say this to say that like I could have really applied myself even with that. I mean, I did learn a lot of things in wrestling, to be honest. But that being said, after that, Josh had told me, he said, hey, finish your wrestling season. Don't worry about coming to fight practice because my season wasn't over. He said, don't worry about coming to fight practice. You'll come, you guys can come, you and your brother can come back when you guys are done with your wrestling season. So I waited for my brother to be done with his wrestling season. I came back from Lumi. This is after I came back from Lumi Island. And yeah, when I was on that island, though, let me backtrack just a little bit. When I was on that island, I had this like revelation. I've always kind of been against my dad. I've always had attitude towards people. And I realized now that that attitude, the only person that I could blame in this entire situation, this entire season of my life was me. But I kept pointing the finger at my dad, like, oh well, I suck, or my life sucks because of my dad and my mom. Like they had their beef, and that's why I turned out the way I was. So same thing, like fight practice, my friend Pierpoint was always asking me like, hey, why don't you apply? Look at what Victor's doing. Why? And I started getting like kind of really pissed off. I'm like, dude, why is everyone talking about Vic? Why is everyone talking about him? Like, that's great, cool. He's going through that. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what my life is like. He doesn't know what hardship is like. That's kind of how I play this victim mentality, and it didn't do anything for me. Like, it really did nothing for me besides make me look like a big like sissy, really. And he called me out. He said, "Look, man, I brought you out here to work, and there's this entire thing that you have not done yet, and I have to come down here to do what I'm doing up there to help you. And this is something you were supposed to do, and it's super easy." And he was like, "This is the reason why you're not here. This is the reason why you're not training. This is the reason why, because you're blaming everyone else for your fault." And I had this really like come to Jesus moment. As hard as that to say, but like that's the truth. That's what happened. I kind of like I couldn't say anything. I didn't have a place. I didn't have a place, like comfort place to like go home to and kind of be at peace with. Like he was right, and I needed that because my dad was telling me that, but I wasn't listening. After that, I came back and like I said, I was wrestling at Eli College, and I kind of took that like and always like it was like in the back of my head, like you need to apply yourself. You need to apply yourself. Stop complaining. Stop complaining. So lo and behold, after that, man, I was training again. I was going to multiple gyms, swinging by, and then I went back. My brother and I went to go train with Josh, and they were training at UFC La Mirada. And this is where I end up training there. And then I tell my dad, "Hey, Dad, I can't really take care of the Dodge Dart. Let's switch." So he could, again, my dad could have said, "No, get out, go find a place to live. I can't. But my dad said no. He said, "Okay, I'll take over the car payment. You have the truck." So he gave me his truck, and I was using his car. And then I said, "All right, cool, thanks. I'm gonna go live on my own. See you later." And I was living in the truck. I was sleeping at this gym I was working at. So I was working at this gym in Buena Park, and I'd sleep in the gym, and then I'd teach the classes, and then I'd go run my class, and then I'd go to fight practice, then I'd come back, or I'd go wash dishes, and then I'd come like I was really chaotic, but at the time I had no other responsibilities besides taking care of myself. That happened. Kept training, and then I ended up like getting tired of working that like both jobs, like the coaching job. I just always was sick of martial arts. It was as much as I love it now, I took it for granted then, and it was so amazing to be able to be part of such a great community. So many people that like I've come across, and like from the small gyms to the big gyms to the smaller fighters to the popular fighters, like being in such close proximity with these people made me realize, like, now thinking back, I was so privileged, like, because I lived in California too. So I was really privileged. And I remember like during this time, I ended up leaving this gym, didn't even give the coach a heads up. I just left and I went to go work at this dishwashing spot. And I was working like 12 hours washing dishes. And I lived down the street from the place in Orange County. It was like Placentia. I had my own apartment. I felt legit. I was like, all right, cool. No more living in my car. I had my own apartment. I had my dog back. It was like I was at like cloud nine, right? So what happened after that, man, was nuts. Got in relationships, I was wilding out. I was doing stupid stuff. And then I ended up getting like I didn't like the dishwashing job again. It was just like this like inconsistency. I didn't like the dishwashing job. I didn't like this. I didn't like that. So what I ended up doing was, as I was working at the gym, I ended up asking around if they're hiring or whatnot. And they said, "Yeah, we're hiring." And then I applied to be a coach. And I said, "Well, if I'm working here all the time, why don't I just quit or like move out? Me and my dog sleep in my truck, and I go to the beach." And there's times where I was like, dude, I'm telling you, this time was tight, bro. Like I was now, okay. So I mean, how do I like reframe this? I was living like a Ronin, a real Ronin, right? Like I was living in my truck. I would go down to the beach, sleep at the beach sometimes with my dog in the truck because it was cooler, and I'd have the window vent open. There's a lot of homeless people there too, so I'd have the window open. I'd be sleeping in the bed of the truck with my dog, and then in the morning I'd go in the beach, I'd rinse off, and then I'd wash my clothes in there, and then I'd dry them in the truck while I'm teaching or whatnot, and then I'd just drive back and forth. That was a lot of gas, but I was doing that, and sometimes I'd be at girls' houses or whatever, and like different women wanted. It was just a different time for me. And what ended up happening was I got after working this job, I met this guy Brandon that was one of the coaches at the gym, and we got along real well. And right around this time is when I got kicked off the fight team because I was working a lot at the UFC gym. Like they just had me working a lot as part of the job, right? And I felt like I was entitled to the job because the people that I trained with. Again, this was like this like entitlement attitude. You don't need to tell me what to do because I know this person or I know that person. And I was a fool, man. I got let go from the job and then the truck broke down. So everything that I was like living on cloud nine, I was living at that time, right before the truck broke down, I was living in a toy store and I had to give my dog up. So now I was like at the end of my rope and I was like crying. Like it was a really dark time at that time. Then I have this heart surgery, my first heart surgery. And it was at 4 a.m. after I got a job at Amazon and I was coughing up blood. It was terrifying. Then, you fast forward and I end up, getting married, moving out, and we moved to COVID happens. We moved to California. We moved from California to Jersey. We wanted to do missionary work. So we go to Hawaii and then Hawaii, Colorado. So we're all over the place, right? And then we have our son in Texas and then we're in Jersey and then I get divorced. So if you're tuning in and this is your first time, you probably could have seen that coming, right? So I say this to say, look, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes and sometimes things just happen. It wasn't something I did and I'm not going to get into that. But the point is, and I'm not trying to make anybody a villain here. The point is that it happened and now I got to get on with my life. I started Phylasso in 2023. My brother was killed in 2023. So why am I bringing this up? Well, I think the thing is that I've gone to church, been part of fight teams, I've been part of gyms, trained at Dwayne Ludwig's gym in Colorado, I think it's Westminster in Colorado, taught in Premier Martial Arts in Texas, and I always came back to this stuff. Then I had my second heart surgery the beginning of 2023. Then I started my business in February 2023, and then I had my brother. My brother was killed in 2023. And after my brother was killed, I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how to mourn. I haven't been able to cry. I think I cried maybe when I say I sobbed, dude, I sobbed probably November of last year because of just everything, right? And then the divorce. And I kind of sat in my truck and I was just sitting there like really confused. And at this point in my life, I'm like, God, like, what is the purpose of all this stuff? Like, not just my life, but I'm pretty sure everyone else has different things going on in their lives. And they're probably asking the same thing. Like, what is the point of this? Because I could easily just disappear. I can go, I don't know. I was actually thinking about when this was all going down, I was actually thinking about just packing up my bag and going and moving to Canada or moving to Japan and just disappearing. Japan wouldn't have worked for me. They would have kicked me out a long time ago. Like, look at this Mexican, get this dude out of here. But I was really like struggling, and I'm alone. So I decided to start this podcast because I was talking to a friend of mine and he told me that Phylasso changed his life. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold the phone. What are you talking about, dude? So I'm going to be having what I decided I want to do is I want to get people's perspective on how they're living their lives. And not this entire thing, like not each one is like, all right, this is about this person, this is about this person, but it's more so like I'm realizing that life is it's just life. Now, there's that quote that Doc Holliday says to Wyatt, and if you haven't seen Tombstone, I recommend you go see it. But he tells him, and this is like an outlaw movie, Western outlaw movie, it's like a 90s film, and he tells him, he says, there is no normal life. It's just life, and you get on with it. And it's true. It's like in my life, I had held myself up to this high standard of the main hero of my story. I am the good guy. I am this. I am that. But everyone, doesn't matter who it is, you are always a villain in someone's story. And now when I look at my son, I think, how could I be present in his life? How could I be a better father? Not comparing my dad to me, but how do I be a better father in general? What's the best way the best way I can do it that really gets him motivated to want to be the best martial artist he can be and then pass it on. He's going to see things that I mess up on and make his thing better. Realize that these were areas in my life that I was kind of struggling with and no one taught me. And this is a huge thing that I think that martial artists are fantastic with, but they also miss the opportunity. we miss the opportunities as martial artists to not just like teach, but also guide people. For example, if I'm teaching someone a combination, I don't expect someone who's never thrown a combination to do the combination. If I say jab, cross, switch kick into a 360 roundhouse kick, I've never taught them that. So why would I expect them to be able to do it? The same thing when someone tells you, oh, you should just know how to use a car. You should know how to drive this. You should know how to do this. But when you graduate high school or when you do this, it's just everyone does it. You should do it too, right? For example, if it's your first time with a lady in bed or first time with a man in bed, like you're automatically assuming that the other person knows what they're doing. They don't. It's their first rodeo. So it's the same thing in life. And I'm realizing this now, like no one taught me. No one taught me about investing. No one taught me about, marriage. No one taught me about the marriage I saw was my parents. And that was obviously ended in divorce. And right. So I see these things and it's just like a ripple effect. And I don't want that to continue. So my thing is I want to be a blessing wherever I go. And this rant, by the way, is not me bragging. I'm not saying I am a good guy. Like I make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes. I made one recently. Like we are not perfect. I am not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I'm here to help you live your life. I'm a life coach. I hate that terminology and I don't want to be a life coach, but I do want you to know that you are a person who have skills and talents that no one has ever been able to help get out of you. And the only way that you're going to be able to is discomfort. Discomfort is what's going to help you grow. If I would have just went back to what's comfortable and left New Jersey to go be with closer people who find that I'm a cool dude, I would not let myself live because I left my kid, right? So these are things that I'm realizing. And another thing that I realized by being out here is that a lot of people prioritize status over experience. And what I mean by that is people really, and the struggle is, this is just like I'm realizing it's an American thing. It's like we prioritize, well, what's your credential? We prioritize individuality by I want to make this, I want to have this car, I want to have this job, I want to have this promotion, I want to have this, I want to have that, I want to have this, I want to be, a star, or I want to be, I want to sleep around, or whatever the case is, and we elevate that above the core values of what make a human being. We are all created in God's image. And if you don't believe that, that's fine. But we all have value. And to say that you don't because, or someone doesn't, the homeless man down the street doesn't have value because he chose that because he's an alcoholic. Like, yeah, sure, probably because the dude probably had some issues in life. Like, I honestly think there are so many things that we can gain from by losers. I'm a loser, right? And you hear that idiom where it's like, you don't lose, you learn. But we like to talk about that, but we don't like to enter that phase. So this new phase in my life right now is a Ronin phase. So that being said, I do want to give you guys a nice little send off because I've been ranting on for a long time and you guys have been listening to me. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm conclude this entire podcast. Salute. Welcome to the Ronin phase. Have a good one. Day at a time.